Thank you so much. Welcome everyone to this meeting of Bloomington Rotary Club. I'm your current president, Sally Gaskell. Thank you so much for being here. We ask that you all remain on mute. If you're not speaking, to improve the sound quality and the connectivity for everyone. Natalie, can you please show the flag for a few moments of silence? Thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce John Vanderzee, who is going to give the reflection. John, are you here? There he is. You're on mute.
Thank you, Sally. Those of you who remember me from my first 23 years in the club know that some of my reflections were in the form of poetry, and today's no exception. The following poem by Don Marquis is about a man's conversation with a moth, during which he learns that sometimes you have to take risks in life. The poem is appropriately titled The Lesson of the Moth. I was talking to a moth the other evening. He was trying to break into an electric light bulb and fry himself on the wires. Well, why do you fellows pull this stunt? I asked him. Because it is the conventional thing for moths? Or why, if that had been an uncovered candle instead of a electric light bulb, you would be now a small, unsightly cinder? Have you no sense? Oh, plenty of it, he answered. But at times we get tired of using it. We get bored with the routine and crave beauty and excitement. Fire is beautiful. And we know that if we get too close to it, it'll kill us. But what does that matter? It is better to be happy for a moment and to be burned up with beauty than to live a long time and to be bored all the while. So we wad all our life up into one little roll, and we shoot the roll. It's better to be part of beauty for one instant than cease to exist than to exist forever and never be part of beauty. Our attitude toward life is come easy, go easy. We are like human beings used to be before they became too civilized to enjoy themselves. And before I could argue with him out of his philosophy, he went and immolated himself on a patent cigar lighter. I do not agree with him myself. I would rather have half the happiness and twice the longevity. But at the same time, I wish there was something I wanted as badly as he wanted to fry himself. So when as individuals or as an organization, we want very much to experience something that has both beauty and integrity, but has some risk, do not so quickly compromise. Remember the lesson of the moth.
John, thank you so much. That beautifully rendered. Thoughts for the day. We have quite a few guests today, and I would like to read your name and recognize you. So please give a wave when I read your name. Guests and visiting Rotarians. We have Carolyn Fry from Bloomington Sunrise Club, Clara Stanley from Brown County Rotary, Annie Hawk from Brown County Rotary. We'll hear from Annie in a minute. And then we have Adam Nahas from Cyclops Studio and Artisan Alley, my guest this week. I saw Isidore James Torrey in the house. Welcome. Stephen Wales, guest of Martha Wales. Tom Hustad, the guest of Judy Schroeder. Tom's an IU Emeritus Professor of Marketing and the biographer of jazz artist Ruby Braff. And also from the Bloomington jazz community, guest of Alan Barker and myself, and probably several others, is David Brent Johnson. Did I miss anyone in our guest lineup? Not. Welcome to all of you. Bloomington Rotary is an engaged group of people who make a difference in our community with connections to like-minded people around the world. And please feel free to join us at a future meeting anytime. We are here every week.
Okay.
Thanks today to our producers, Michael Shermas, Alan Barker. I never called you Alan Baker before, but there's a first time for everything.
I like it.
Aaron Davis and Natalie Blaze. The roundabout reporter for this week is Glenn Murray. We have a couple of birthdays of Rotarians this week. Tomorrow, past President Charlie Osborne and immediate past President Ashley Wesley. Tomorrow, July 21st, happy birthday. July 25th, Dick McCaig. And July 26th, past President Scott Walters. No membership anniversaries this week. We do have some announcements this week. First, a final reminder that we're all invited to celebrate the life of Judge Randy Bridges this Saturday at 11:30 at Trinity Episcopal, and then at 12:30 across the street at Nick's. And now Annie Hawk, who's our guest from Brown County, would like to make an announcement in support of Chamberfest Brown County. Annie, take it away. Annie, you are on mute.
Hold on. Sorry for the, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Wonderful. Okay. So I'm on the board of Chamberfest Brown County, and we've been working for almost a year now to put together a 6-day chamber music festival in Nashville. And all of the details of what has been planned are on our website, which appropriately is named chamberfestbrowncounty.com. So you can go to the website and see the schedule, but I'd like to just take a brief time to run down what's going to be happening. So it's Tuesday, August 17th through Sunday, August 22nd. And there's going to be a piano trio on Tuesday. It's our artistic director who's here, and he'll pop in and say hi in just a minute. Andreas Ioannidis, he's the pianist for the piano trio. And then Madeline Moeller, who graduated from IU, but she's coming from LA as the violinist, and Gabe Martins, who grew up in Bloomington. He is the cellist. He recently won the Sphinx Prize. So if you follow us on Instagram, you can see, and Facebook, you can see a little clippets of his performance. Then Tuesday is Volante Winds, Wednesday is Volante Winds, and they are all former IU students, but they're now living, one in Illinois, one in New Brunswick, Canada. He's coming from the horns player is coming from New Brunswick, Canada, and then some people are still in the area. So they're going to play with Futaba Nikawa, who's another pianist. She's on the faculty at IU, and they're going to do some woodwind piano work. Then Thursday, we have the Fry Street Quartet, who is the quartet in residence from Utah State University. They're coming to play on Friday evening, and they are doing we're screening a film on Thursday at the Brown County High School. It's an environmental film that they put together with a physicist who is on the faculty at Utah State. So it's important classical music with environmental focus. So there's wonderful images and commentary, and then wonderful music as well. And then they're playing the Brahms Quintet, I believe, on Dvorak Quintet on Friday at the United Methodist Church. All of those performances are at the United Methodist Church. And then on Saturday, the Pacifica, who you all know probably as the quartet in residence at IU, is coming to play at the Playhouse. And we're having a little bit of focus on Beethoven. So it was his 250th anniversary last year, but nobody because of COVID got to celebrate. So we're having him as a little focus. And Ivan Roman Ivanovich is going to do a lecture before the Pacifica Quartet to talk a little bit about Beethoven. And the title of his talk is Caring for Beethoven, which is meant to have a double entendre of why should we care about Beethoven? And also Beethoven's got a bad rap. I mean, the whole recently. So that's how do we care for him? So that's happening. And then our final event is on Sunday, a matinee at 3:00 at the United Methodist Church. And that's going to be a lighter program. It's a vocalist coming to sing New World and Old World songs. Bruno and what is Bruno's last name?
Sanders.
Bruno Sanders is going to be performing some songs along with the pianist. So it's going to be a great afternoon. So that's kind of the lineup of what's going on. Andreas, did you want to say something else?
Not really. I just want to say hi. Hi. I can't see. We can't see ourselves here. It's a little bit creepy, but that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you so much for this wonderful intro. So tickets are available at chamberfestbrowncounty.com. Is that right? Are these events?
Well, the events at the Nashville United Methodist Church are free admission, but we do advise people to go online and reserve their seat, which is $15 to reserve if they want to ensure that they have it. And then at the Playhouse is in charge of ticketing, and I believe it's $25 for adults and $10 for students and free for under 18.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we'll be sure to get the word out about the Chamber Fest of Brown County also in our newsletter. So come back anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to share the results of our recent membership survey on returning to in-person meetings after these many months. First, I am very happy to announce that we Rotarians are 100% vaccinated. To be completely transparent, one person out of 70 said they preferred to not answer the question, but that person also indicated that they would not be attending in-person meetings. So I'm going to go with, we are 100% vaccinated. 58% of you plan to attend in-person meetings only. 34% plan to utilize both in-person and virtual option. And 8%, which is 6 people, plan to attend only on Zoom. So we are absolutely continuing to keep the virtual option a part of every meeting. It's confirmed. Our first in-person meeting will be August 10th at the Frangipani Room on the mezzanine level of the Indiana Memorial Union. We have not yet confirmed the final price for your lunch, but we'll have it for you soon from IU Catering. And it should not be too different from what it was 2 years ago. In the open-ended survey comments, we received several notes of concern about ensuring that when we do return to in-person meetings, that we observe the universities, the counties, and the CDC's public health mandates. Rest assured, we will. If you invite people to be your guest, please make sure that they are vaccinated. Otherwise, they'll need to be masked and physically distanced. We also received a note from a new member who said they've only experienced virtual meetings and don't know what to expect from an in-person one. So the board last week realized that we need to do a new member orientation. And I'm really grateful to our president-elect, Alan Barker, who has graciously offered to host an event for new members at his home on Wednesday, August 18th. So this is going to be for all new members from the last 2 years. So moving along, we have a community service project for the month of August. Saturday, August the 7th at various locations throughout Bloomington is the Teachers Warehouse Supply Drive for the year. So please complete the sign up genius or email Sarah Laughlin with your interest for that. And finally, the program committee will be meeting on July 27th at 1:30, 1 week from today. I always feel like I should ask, are there any questions about these announcements? But instead, we're going to do Happy Dollars, a Rotary tradition that benefits Teachers Warehouse. Natalie, can you please insert the link to our PayPal in the chat? And do we have anyone who's happy? Please speak up.
I took Bob Hamill to Indianapolis last Thursday, and he gave an excellent talk on the impact of, oh my, I'm losing the name, Bill Garrett, on the history of, actually the history of relationships to the Indianapolis Kiwanis Club at the Columbia Club. And I was most happy that they started their meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Phil. That's wonderful. Any other happy dollars? Is anyone happy? Is no one happy? Lynn Schwartzberg, are you happy? But you're muted, so you're not really happy.
I'm really happy. I'm really happy. But you'll see why in just a few minutes. So I'm just going to give happy dollars because I'm really happy.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Am I?
Really? Nobody's happy here? Charlotte, are you happy?
I am happy. I'll tell you why. I just saw Jeff Bezos and his brother and the other people who went out in space come back and be as brilliant as I've seen anybody for a long time. And I've discovered Bloomberg News, and they were just leaping all over me. And they were talking about, just creating a road to space where we'll move all of our polluting industry someplace else and pollute space instead of the earth. But in any case, it was a very happy occasion, and I was surprised to feel as happy as I do.
That's great. Thank you. I am surprised that you felt happy about that. I'm glad to know.
I'm going to quickly jump in and talk about something that started very sad and then became very happy. You probably are all aware that over the past week, South Africa has been through some pretty substantial turmoil.
Yes.
There was a lot of rioting and looting in my home province of KwaZulu-Natal as a result of the ex-president being put in prison because he is a criminal. I just want to be clear about that. But the good news, and for me, which was so spectacular to watch, was how communities of all kinds in South Africa came together, helping each other out, serving above self, and really believing in a single country that is for all in that amazing place. So I have hope that that country can still pull itself together.
Excellent.
All right. Can I jump in and say I am happy, and I don't normally talk about happiness in policy, but I am happy that starting this month, people that have young children, parents of young children, will receive more financial support because of rising child poverty, and children are our future, and we need more of them, and we need more healthy and happy and well-educated ones. Thank you.
That makes me happy too. Thanks, Dave. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Raj.
About time. I'm happy because my daughter and my grandson came for a few-day visit from Boston, and they are here with me. And I do second Dave Myers about moment of cheer, about helping the people who need help and live between us.
Thank you, Raj. Okay, with that, I am going to turn things over to Lynn Schwartzberg, who is now going to tell us why she's happy.
Hello. I am happy because I get to introduce you to an old friend of mine, Loren Schoenberg, who you read about in the bio, so I won't repeat all of this amazing stuff that this gentleman has accomplished. But when we were in high school, I was a student with Loren, and we studied music theory together. He obviously was way ahead of my brain in music theory. And he had a vision of himself involved in jazz as a musician, as a researcher, as an expert. And I'm going to share a few little things. One is this amazing clip. You don't have to read it all, but this was 16-year-old Loren Schoenberg, who worked at the Jazz Museum on 55th Street in New York. When we were in high school, he commuted to the city after we went and did nothing after school. He went into the city and followed his dream. In our wonderful high school yearbook, how about that? This is Loren, who was most musical. I was always so enthralled with a human being who saw their path in life, pursued it, and succeeded at it. I always wanted to have that drive, and I'm still hunting for it. So I'm happy because I still have a future, and I am proud to introduce Loren from Fair Lawn High School, who is going to speak to us about jazz today.
Thank you, Lynn. And it's great to see you after all these years. Well, we've been in touch. We've been in touch of reunions and stuff like that. But it's great to see you. I have a strong connection with Bloomington and IU. Two folks who are on the call today are peers of mine, David Brent Johnson, who has, for my money, you know, one of the half dozen best jazz radio shows that I know of, regardless of topic. And I've been a fan of his for a long time. And also Professor Tom Hudstadt, who's out there somewhere, who wrote a wonderful biodiscography, I guess you would call it, of a musician that I was associated with for many years, going back to that New York Jazz Museum 50 years ago. So anyway, there's another guy I want to mention, Dr. David Baker. I assume a lot of you knew David Baker, who I worked with for years with the Smithsonian Jazz Orchestra, and another faculty member there named Brent Wallerab, who is a absolutely brilliant guy. So anyway, I have a lot of connections out there, played there a few times. And so anyway, Lynn, thank you so much for asking me. I'm going to start, but I hope that we can get to the question and answer pretty soon. This is very difficult for me because I teach, and usually my teaching blocks or my talking blocks are in 2-hour segments. So to have to come and do something in 15 or 20 minutes is like impossible. So I'll start, but I think the sooner the people interrupt with questions or comments, I think it'll be a lot better, because I'd really like to tailor this to everyone out there. Where to start? Okay, if I can share a screen for 1 second. Let me see if that's possible here. If the host can let me share, I want to show you something real quick. And let me just get this for you here, because this will set the stage for today. Here we go. We are here. And let's have one of those internet moments where I can't do anything. Here we are. Okay. There we are there. And here. And now, I assume you're not seeing anything. Okay. So here we are. And now I will share it. And let me know if you can see this. Can you folks see a picture?
Yes.
Okay. It's Louis Armstrong, hopefully, playing his trumpet. And this photo is one that, for me, kind of represents two things. And this is a big part of my my obsession with jazz. And that is that there's no better window into American history, or in a sense, world history, than jazz. And jazz specifically as exemplified by the person who, no one created jazz, but the person who did to jazz what Neil Armstrong did. People, sometimes confuse Louis Armstrong and Neil Armstrong, of course. And that's because when Neil Armstrong, was the first person to step on the moon, on another planet, I mean, I don't care how many people do it after he did it. I mean, that first step off of that lunar module onto another planet, I mean, that was the unknown. And everyone else who does something like that is following in his footsteps. And in a sense, that's what Armstrong did with music, specifically American music, but also, jazz is so influential that no one can really do equal, or I should say surpass what Armstrong did, which was to take a music that was a vernacular folk form, which is wonderful. I don't mean to do an hierarchy here of art and fine art, but who took it over somewhere else and took a step where he found music and where he took it to. And in my estimation, that is a leap that I don't think we'll ever see surpassed. But the thing about this particular photo that I find so fascinating is that it's really kind of the history of the world, because we know that all human beings, right? In other words, the first human beings as we know them were in Africa, and that this is in Africa, but of course it's in Egypt, and that the Sphinx and the pyramids really represent the coming together of East and West and North and South. It's a different kind of culture than you find in most of Africa. And it's really kind of like the merging of influences from many, many different places. And you have him playing the trumpet. And the trumpet, of course, represents art and music and the transformative nature of art and of, frankly, also of the other, which we'll talk about in a moment. And you also have significantly his wife, because this is his fourth wife, Lucille Armstrong. And she actually also plays a very important story, or represents something very important, which of course is how women continue to be written out of history, and their place, I mean, it's just a common place, no matter where it is. And number two, you'll notice that both Armstrongs are dark complected. And this has to do with the prejudice of skin color and tone. And it's not just in the African-American community where it's prevalent, but in my own ethnic background, whatever you want to call it, Jewish background, the Sephardic Jewish people, the Ashkenazi Jewish people, in Italy, in Israel, we have it in Japan, we have it wherever there's people who are close to the equator and have a darker skin color. And there's just an eternal prejudice about that within our culture. Both these two people, his wife was a dancer at the Cotton Club. We could talk about that for a long time. But nonetheless, she was a dancer at a famous Harlem spot called the Cotton Club, where they did not allow dark-skinned dancers to be in the dance line, in the chorus line. When Armstrong first came to New York, Louis Armstrong, he joined a band led by a guy named Fletcher Henderson, and he was not allowed to entertain and sing as much as the other people in the band because he was so dark. And so consequently, this photo represents that as well. And ultimately, it really represents freedom, because jazz, in a sense, is really two things. It's thought to be the sound of surprise, and it's thought to be a sound of freedom. Many people from around the world, I mean, I'll drop a name just real quick, but I spoke at the White House once, and Václav Havel was there also. We're talking about democracy in jazz. And he talked about how the Voice of America broadcasts, the sound of jazz, and this is a well-known thing, I didn't even need to drop those names, but that the sound of jazz and what it represented to people all over the world has been an inspiration for freedom, because there's something about the music. I'll shift over here for a moment. I'm up in the Bronx, New York, but nonetheless, you can see my windows there. And I want you to think of those windows I would want you to think of that wall, I should say, as the Constitution of the United States. And the thing that's so amazing about our Constitution, I guess I'll stop the screen share here just for a moment, if I can. 1 second. There we go. Am I back? Can you see me there? Okay. One thing about the Constitution that makes it such an individual document is it has built into it surprise. It has built into it freedom. And the windows in my wall there represent the amendments to the Constitution. And so in other words, the Constitution is kind of unique in the sense that it was created to open the window and let the bad air out. Slavery, women not having the vote, and all the other things that have been accomplished through the amendments to our Constitution. And in a certain kind of way, jazz is the oral or artistic culmination of America's greatest potential. And I got to make it clear right here that I'm interpreting in my own words thoughts and things that come from other people that I've kind of maybe merged a little bit with my own thoughts. But people like Stanley Crouch, Albert Murray, Ralph Ellison, and many other people have written far more eloquently about the stuff that I'm talking about here, but I'm just trying to bring it to bear during this particular talk. So with that in mind, I want to talk during my brief talk here about how I find jazz so relevant in 2021. I could go on forever about the great records and let's listen to Duke Ellington and who Ellington was and et cetera, and the great jazz artists of the past, the great jazz artists of today, how much fun it is to play it, how much fun it is to listen to it, how it's informed musical culture around the world, even in musics that you might think have nothing to do with jazz. You can look at everything written about rap music and do a find and replace with jazz and rap, just for starters. The same thing that they say about rap, they said about jazz 100 years ago. There's no melody. I can't understand the words. There's sex or there's drugs in some of the lyrics. It'll grow hair on the back of your hands. And underneath it all, a lot of it, of course, is the incipient racism of the culture that we live in. So for me, what I find so relevant about jazz in 2021 is coming to terms in which we live in a society. Can you imagine for a moment for people around the world in history who suffered from a plague and people actually turning down because it's become politicized, a vaccine not to die, right? I mean, can you imagine? Can you just imagine that 100 years ago? Okay, can you imagine a country, and without getting partisan about it, I'll try and be as balanced as I can. The fact that the United States right now is in this huge pendulum swing, as we all know, right? From George H.W. Bush to Bill Clinton to George W. Bush to Barack Obama to the last guy and now to the current guy, right? I mean, this unbelievable pendulum swing. And I think that, that the best way to jazz helps me understand it. The story of jazz, terms that might be off-putting to some, but terms like white appropriation, the fact that we live in a country in which the genocide and the slavery that underline a huge part of our country's history, or at least the beginning of it, and the tremendously amazing thing that happened, which is that to create a system out of that again has those windows, hopefully, to transcend all those problems. And so when we start to get into the history of jazz, who created it, who publicized it, who became famous, what is it about jazz that attracts so many people? What is it? Is it the improvisation? Improvisation is not unique to jazz music. People improvise in all kinds of music all around the world. Is it the rhythm? What is it about the rhythm that that just kind of activates people in what we might call traditional jazz, which is the kind of jazz that, frankly, if you wanted to do a historical search, like where does that rhythm come from, right? That rhythm that we associate with jazz, snapping the finger and this kind of swing feeling, and just that kind of thing that Armstrong and Ellington and Billie Holiday and Benny Goodman and all the great people who played the music, you know, where does it really come from? Well, we'd have to say it really comes from the African-American church. And it comes with elements from Africa. Probably, you know, all culture from Africa has always been a catalyst, no matter where it goes around the world. It's a catalyst. It changes things, changes the essence of things. But there's a huge amount of jazz and that rhythm and that music that comes from Europe also, and comes from the Caribbean, and comes from all, which is also the African influence, comes from all many, many different kind of places. So what is it about that rhythm that spoke to so many people? You know, who's America's greatest composer of the 20th century? I mean, I'm starting to sound like Professor Irwin Corey or Groucho Marx here, and I realize it. Those are some dated references, but those of you will get some of them. For those that don't, it just means somebody who's just not making any sense whatsoever. But if we start to try and figure out how all this happened, it leads us to the same questions that can help us understand where we are in 2021. I teach young musicians. I'm currently teaching, I've been at the Juilliard School teaching history, the jazz history and culture, and trying to give a large picture of it. And before that, I taught it at other places too. The only reason I mentioned the teaching is that I've had to codify my thoughts. And so the question that raises itself ultimately for the young musician in 2021 is, what does it mean to be a jazz musician in 2021? And it means many, many different things. I'll talk about my two co-directors at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, John Baptiste and Christian McBride. You may not know those names. You may know John Baptiste because he won the Academy Award for some music recently. He's the musical director on the Colbert Show, which I went to the taping of it yesterday. And by the way, when you go to a taping of the Stephen Colbert Show, the thing that really animates the whole show, I mean, he's brilliant and all the talk is wonderful. That's what the show is about. But the band, when you're there in person, the band plays at the beginning, the band plays in the middle, the band plays at the end, and all that crazy enthusiasm from the audience you see is really in relation to the music that John's playing. Now, some people might say that the music that John's playing on that show is not quote unquote jazz, because there's elements of funk in it and some rock and roll in it and some R&B in it and some rap in it and all this kind of stuff. What I would submit to you is that music is actually much more in line with what Louis Armstrong did when he quote unquote created jazz than what jazz has become now in most people's mind, frankly. And we live in a world in which 2%, and maybe David can validate me here, I believe, but you know, when you look at the numbers, only 2% of people identify themselves as either people who listen to jazz or buy jazz recordings. And that includes Kenny G and a lot of the more pop versions of jazz that some jazz purists will say, well, that's not really jazz. 2%. So what's happened to this music? That it went from being, and jazz was never America's popular music, as is frequently said, but jazz was a flavor. Jazz was a spice. It was a flavor in the diet of American popular culture. 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, into the 60s, jazz wasn't everywhere, but boy, it was in many, many different places. How has it gone from maybe like one of the most primary ingredients in American popular musical culture to something that is, kind of minuscule? And the answer, I think, really lies in the double-edged sword. It's what we confront with political correctness. It's what we confront when we talk about appropriation, when we talk about white privilege, when we talk about all these things that to some people are tremendously, divisive issues and things that tend to separate us, which has to do with the fact that jazz was in America, as it became popular, a functional music, which means that people danced to it, people bought the records, they sang the songs, and it wasn't thought to be something like small, niche-ish, that you had to be some kind of expert. I'll tell you one experience I have all the time, and somebody better cut me off here because I'll never stop. That an experience I have all the time, I'm at root a jazz musician. I made my living playing for decades. And when I would meet people and they say, so what do you do? I'm a musician. Oh, isn't that nice? What kind of music? Oh, I play jazz. And this is no hyperbole. This is a fact. 9 out of 10 people respond with this. Really? You know, I don't know a lot about jazz. I kind of like it, but I don't know a lot about it. 9 out of 10 people. Even sometimes after I'll give a talk like this, where I reference that. And at the end, people come up and say at the end, you know, I really don't know anything about it. My point is what? When I order a chicken sandwich in a restaurant, I don't say to the waiter, I'd like the chicken sandwich. By the way, I don't know a lot about chicken. You know, I don't feel necessary to identify myself as ignorant about something. But something's happened with jazz music where, again, I moved to New York 45 years ago. So I've been playing jazz professionally for a long time. And no matter where I go, this is the response. So what does that mean? That it's become something that people think they have to know something about, as opposed to something that people just love. When you go to the movies, you say, I don't know anything about D.W. Griffith or something like that. You just go, you see a movie and you like it. Okay, great. So part of the reason that jazz has become so specialized and so niche-ish, I think, is because it got separated from its functionality in our culture, which partially has something to do with very well-intentioned cultural, social, racial moves, which is to say that Benny Goodman and and Dave Brubeck and so many other wonderful white musicians who were brilliant talents, all realized that what they were really doing was spreading the music and the gospel and the joy of something that really is African-American in basic identity. All right. Leontine Price, Jesse Norman. No one says that these great African-American opera singers can't sing Puccini, right? Because they're not Italian. They didn't grow up in Bologna or something like that. Doesn't make a difference where they come from. It's art. They happen to sing it great. Second to no one. Same in jazz. You don't have to be African-American or from any particular part of the country or culture to play it well. But nonetheless, no one is going to deny that in a certain kind of traditional opera, that the traditions and the way from which it all grew was Italian. And then we had French and German and all different variations of it. But that Italian essence remains there in terms of the roots of it. So what happened in jazz is what happens in American culture at large. It's what we call white appropriation, which is Elvis Presley is the one that people go crazy about. And Bruce Springsteen's the one they go crazy about. And Benny Goodman and the original Dixieland Jazz Band and all these other folks who are brilliant, wonderful creators like Jesse Norman or whomever you want to think about, African-American artists who have done other things. But America, because of its eternal race problems, which is why we are at where we're at in 2021, including the vaccine and everything else, because we've been unable to solve this existential issue. Consequently, jazz, in a certain way, became a test tube case to say, it was created by African-American folks. Let's take the music from its functionality as a dance music, as something relatively informal, and we're going to do something wonderful. We're going to move it to the concert hall, the kiss of death, in a certain kind of way. Because what happens in a concert hall, and here I'm going to limit myself to 28 seconds because this is usually a much longer point that I make. I love classical music. I've taught it. I've played it. This is not about trying to cast aspersions on it. Who would care if I did anyway? Although my name is Schoenberg, but that's a different story. Okay. So to get back to it, what's the point? The point is, in my estimation, and many, many other people, what happens in a concert hall, hearing quote unquote classical music, is a very weird thing. People fall asleep. People read the program notes so they can understand what Beethoven is saying. Maybe Beethoven had a corn on his foot and he wrote a chord. You know, who the hell knows? And we invest, because of our American insecurity, because we're such a young country, that somehow this sophisticated music from Europe is somehow superior. We still buy mustard with French names. We have all kinds of, problems with thinking that European sophisticated stuff is somehow better. Yes, it still persists to this day. So anyway, we get to the concert hall, in which I think the great majority of people have no idea what they're hearing, and they're there for other reasons. It's like eating spinach or something like that. Okay, that's my thought. Now, what's the point? So we're going to help jazz. We're going to elevate jazz in America, and we're going to put it in the concert hall. So now we have this weird thing of this intensely rhythmic music, in which rhythm, unlike in some other musical forms, the rhythm is as important as the harmony. It's as important as the melody. In some music, the harmony and the melody is like what really entrances you. And the rhythm is necessary. The rhythm is the heartbeat. In temporal terms, the rhythm, if you didn't have rhythm with Beethoven's Fifth, you'd never get beyond, that would be it, without rhythm. All right, so what's the point? You have this intensely rhythmic music with strong African roots and dance roots, or as Duke Ellington used to say, something that encourages the Terpsichorean urge. I know that sounds like something you go to the doctor for. I have a Terpsichorean urge here, but what's the point? The point is that, what is the point? Oh, yes. The point is that now most people who listen to this intensely rhythmic music sit like this. Okay, you get the point. Okay, so that's kind of, and the same with Stravinsky's music. I mean, I would love to go to a performance of one of your great symphony orchestras at IU or wherever the heck it is, which is, as we all know, is one of the great music conservatories. You know it because you're all there, but I'll just say it as someone who's in snobbish New York, that everyone knows that IU is just one of the great programs in the world. But what's the point? The point is that I would love to hear somebody in a Stravinsky piece just shout in the audience. Ah! Okay, I mean, I would love for that to happen because it should happen. That music isn't made just to sit and listen to, like, or something like that. It's lost it. I'm finished, but thank you very much.
After all, people rioted at the beginning of Stravinsky's career. Loren, thank you so much. We could listen to you all day, but I do want to see if there are any questions in the audience, any burning questions in the last 5 minutes that we've got. I can't see you all at once, so please just speak up. Who's got a question?
Do you think Benny Goodman's concert at Carnegie Hall, therefore, was a mistake?
Oh, no, of course not. Of course not. We have to embrace, there's nothing that we can do about history. It happened. But to understand Goodman's concert and how wonderful he was in breaking the color line, was that Goodman was the first one. And I'll mention on YouTube, I have a series that I did just off the cuff with 38 episodes dedicated to a session by session thing about Benny Goodman's career. That Goodman broke the color line. He's the one who, on his way up to fame, not when he was at the pinnacle, but on the road up, hired 2 Black musicians and presented them. Here we are, take it or leave it. And believe me, some people wanted to leave it when it was not like he was king of the world and he decided to integrate his band. Not only that, but Goodman did something amazing at Carnegie Hall. And by the way, I have to say that my whole awakening to jazz came because in my local hometown library, they had a copy of the Benny Goodman 1938 Carnegie Hall concert. And it was that record, took home and listened to it, that kind of awakened me, was that Goodman asked 2 superior bands to appear at his concert. Now, who in their right mind, black, white, green, yellow, grizzled, gray, would ever do that, right? I mean, what kind of athlete or entertainer or professor or whatever the heck you are would ever like invite for your big moment 2 people superior? Very few people. Ellington asked the Ellington band to come, and he asked the Count Basie band to come. And people from both those bands appeared on that stage that night. So
Amazing.
no, it was not a mistake. Far from it.
So what can we do? What can we do to remedy this cultural spinach situation that we find ourselves in?
I have a funny answer, which would be inappropriate, so we'll skip over that one. But the serious answer would be vote.
Yes, we vote with our money.
Yeah, and I'll make one serious point now, which is, well, vote, of course, is serious. But in terms of what we can really do, in terms of the specific thing about jazz and the kind of stuff that we're talking about, is put your money where your ears are.
Yes.
And enough with this virtual stuff, which is important, but get out and support live music, period. I lived my whole life, like, you know, with records and history and analyzing and all this kind of stuff. If I had to, I'd give it all up in a heartbeat and devote it all to supporting the live music. If you don't do that, then everything else means nothing. It's just so much onanism, you know.
Well, can I say something?
Charlotte, yes.
Yes. We've been very lucky here, I think, with radio jockeys or whatever we call them, because we started with Michael Bourne was here several years ago. And I think Michael Bourne out in, he went to Newark from here.
Yes. And he's doing well now. He's been ill, but he's now recovering very well.
Yes, and then we had Joe Bourne, and now we have David Brent Johnson, who's a blessing, because I love jazz, and I've got 2 sets of CDs, and they're about equal of classical and jazz, and I go to jazz whenever I feel bad, whenever I want to be happy, which is most of the time I want to be happy, and I just wonder how lucky we are, or if there are other places. There was a guy who had the evening show who died, Bob somebody, but that, you know, we get sometimes evening shows from elsewhere, from the West Coast, but not often. Are there others we should be listening to? And I do put my money where my mouth is.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure most of you do. Well, no, frankly, I mean, you've got David Brent Johnson, so I would support local. And although he's national, and now everybody is kind of international because everything is
because we can be
right. So I would just stick with David for now, and you'll find other good things, but no one is as broad and as deep in his research and presentation.
You know, Michael,
time for one last question, and I think Jim Sims, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to thank, I think Loren, did I pronounce that correctly?
Loren.
Loren, okay. Thank you very, very much for this talk today. I really like the flavor and the spice, to use your words, on what we heard today. It's kind of like having a big dip ice cream, but you get 1 spoonful. I want more. I want more. But my question is, back in my college days when I first started in mid-70s, I listened to a lot of Chick Corea and Stanley Clarke and Charlie Bird, you know, moving into that area. Chuck Mancini, smooth jazz, fusion jazz, all kind of different acronyms, I think, or I'm sorry, descriptions. But I was always interested in how that still related to other forms, disco, rap and hip hop, R&B. We even had a heck of a saxophone player in our church music group, and how that all connected. But I guess my question to you, actually, and I was interested too, with the relationship socially, with prejudice due to the tone of skins, even within the Black community or Black musicians and those venues, which happens in real life, by the way, and I'm sure you're aware of that. But my question to you was here in 2021, how do we let the bad air out? And you did say vote, but I was wondering if you had any way to expound on that at all. How do we let the bad air out in the current climate we're in?
Okay, here's an answer, and thank you for that. I'll be frank. It's the same in every jazz thing I do, And I'm looking here, I'm scrolling here, page to page, seeing all the people with their cameras on. And it kind of reflects, frankly, the jazz audience. And the jazz audience, one way of looking at it, demographically, there's many different ways, but the one I'll address right now, because some are just obvious, is age. So I think by far the most important thing, I mean, at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, at one point we were, just confronted with, mostly older audiences, and we would try and, do things that were eminently to attract younger people. In jazz, younger is like under 70. Okay. So, well, I'm being frank with you. Just look at the audiences at jazz festivals, jazz clubs, for the most part. Okay. I think the best thing that we could do, Jim, would be to everybody here to find somebody under 30 and share your passion for the music that you love. And specifically in this case, I would say jazz, because that's what I'm talking about. But the music that you love, that they're not exposed to in popular culture. And they may not love it. You can expose them to it and they may say, well, I don't really like it, but at least do that. And then talk about the bad air and the politics and the Constitution, all that kind of stuff. I think that the music is a window into it. And if you can present jazz music as, and I'll end with this, which is kind of how I organize all my thoughts about these things, it's a crossword puzzle. And in the center of the crossword puzzle is the guy that we started the presentation with today, Louis Armstrong. And if I were to put Louis Armstrong's name in the center of a crossword puzzle, my challenge would be, I'm about to use a double negative, would be that there's no place that you can't go, in my estimation, in world history that can't intersect with one of the letters in Louis Armstrong's name. Somehow you can make a connection through the wide spread of what he represented. How did this kid from, a bad part of New Orleans, not traditionally schooled, with all kinds of challenges when he was born and all that kind of stuff, to 50 years later, along with Charlie Chaplin, being one of the most recognized faces on the planet Earth. And we can focus, you can focus on Chaplin if you want, but that's not going to be quite as helpful as focusing on Armstrong. So that would be my first step for everybody. We find somebody young and bring them along. So that's my first.
Loren, thank you so much. Would you be able to stay for a few minutes to answer more questions after we close the meeting?
Oh, sure.
Oh, awesome. So in honor of your presentation today, we're going to be making a donation to a local nonprofit here in Bloomington. I'm going to draw a new organization from the hat. Kansas City Monarchs cap. We have a bunch of new groups in here, and let's see who it is. Pantry 279, a new organization that's addressing food security in our area. Awesome. So let's close the meeting by reciting the four-way test +1. Of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And fifth, is it fun? Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you. Oh, Sally, we didn't mention what's next for next week. Can I just quickly jump in?
Oh my gosh, Alan, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. No problem at all. Just to everybody who's still here with us, we have the Honorable Lee Hamilton next week. A really spectacular event for us all. He'll be speaking briefly about observations on democracy, and then he'll be fielding questions. And Bob Zaltzberg will be here to handle the moderation of the conversation. So please.
Can I join on that one?
Please do.
You sure can. He's one of our superstars.
Anytime you can join our organization.
Okay, I shall.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, please join us.
Thank you for that save, Alan. Appreciate it very much. So, Loren, before we start on more questions, I have to say hello from Aaron Flagg, whom I work with.
Oh.
Aaron is the co-chair of Juilliard Jazz, and he's on a board that I work with.
So he's a hero of mine.
He's awesome. Pretty awesome dude. So more questions for Loren.
Yeah, Lauren, I'm going to jump in. I'm actually, I direct the entrepreneurship office at the Jacob School of Music. So it's really fabulous to hear what you have to say and just to get a general sense of how you view the world of music as well as the world of jazz. And something interesting that you said at the beginning, which really got my attention, was what is jazz? You know, this whole question about, you know, what is jazz in its essence? And I'd be interested to find out from you where you think jazz might be going as it sort of permeates different parts of our culture in different ways. You know, where do you think we're headed in this concept of what jazz might become or is?
Well, you know, one thing that I'll start my brief answer with this. You know, sometimes people use opportunities like this, you know, to plug their books or to plug things that they've written. So I will not mention that I wrote a book called The NPR Curious Listener's Guide to Jazz, because that would be totally inappropriate.
Well, thanks for not telling us.
Thank you. But in that book, I mean, I just had to start it with, you know, what is jazz? I mean, that your question really is kind of at the root of everything. And the only thing that I could come up with then, this was about 20 years ago, and it's still kind of my thought about it, is that jazz is just another way station on the river and stream of American culture. And it really has more to do with all the other genres of music and idioms of music. It has more to do with ragtime and hip hop and R&B and soul and all these things. It's just one of the boats on that river, so to speak. And where the river is going to go and how it's going to go, I mean, you know, everyone in Germany right now is saying, you know, who knew this was coming, and you know, and the tremendous tragedy over in Europe right now. In the same sense, you know, actually, this doesn't add up, but I don't know what's going to happen with it. I don't know where it's going. I don't know what its relevance is going to be. I'd almost rather get rid of the word, because I think that people might be much more open to all different kinds of music and art if it didn't have that stupid label on it. The labels come from the industry. The music comes from the marketing thing to say, I like Coke, I don't like Pepsi. So I like jazz. Well, then that means, most people think it means, well, then I don't like something else. So I really don't know. I think that the best way to understand it, and this is, you know, at my age now, in my early 60s, I kind of feel differently about it than I used to, which is just kind of, I kind of like sit back and look at it and say, it's going to go where it's going to go. There's nothing you can really do about it, except through action and advocacy. So that's the beginning of an answer to your question.
You know, that's really interesting, because you also talk of it, I mean, you didn't use this word, but you talk of it a lot as being sort of a catalyst, that it's sort of in the middle of this river, and the energy, the sort of the mindset and the whole sort of mindset of what it is to be. And I've been fascinated also just to get a sense of how you think and how I've become aware of jazz as a catalyst. And it seems like the two go hand in hand. So it's as much about a mindset as it is what you do, right?
Well, I'll tell you, you know, what has a lot to do with the way that I think about things has a lot to do with the music of Brahms, actually. But that's a whole nother discussion for another time. You know, the process of developing variation. It's a wonderful book by Walter Frisch about that. And I think that I'll leave it there, but I would love to talk to them more about this.
Yeah, well, I'd love to chat as well. I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
Please do. Please do.
So next, Susie Johnson, and then Charlotte.
I asked too many.
Susie Graham. I'm sorry.
Susie Graham.
Susie, whoever you are.
I like the name Johnson. Yeah. Loren, first of all, I'm so happy that you were here today. I'm thrilled that my good friend Lynn Schwartzberg brought you today. But I wanted to share just a tiny little insight for you. So I grew up in a household where there was a lot of classical music played and just a smidgen of jazz. I didn't get to understand it or learn about it. It was my two sons who had an outstanding jazz exposure in high school at one of our high schools here in Bloomington. And it was through them that I learned not only to enjoy it just as an art form, but to understand it, I appreciate how to hear it and how to engage it when I'm, in a live session, all those kinds of things. So it's not just about, us reaching back to the youth, right? Because it was my young sons who brought it to me. And so maybe that's another perspective that you can share with others when you talk about it as well. So fund good education programs. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen. Thank you for that.
Internationally, isn't it? I mean, Europe and Asia are beginning to love jazz, or they have been loving jazz.
Oh, they were there before we were in terms of taking it seriously. Absolutely. Absolutely, Charlotte.
Yeah. What a joy. I've got my granddaughter playing the saxophone. And she's
Is the
now,
Jazz Kitchen still open out there?
yes.
Okay, well,
David can speak to that.
That's a great way just to take a young person, maybe, without proselytizing or say, you have to eat your spinach, just take them and let them see it in person and kind of get the vibration of it. Because there's something about the vibration of when jazz is done well.
It carries you.
Yeah. But it's something that where you see people cooperating with a greater goal in mind than you do, like, for instance, when you go see an orchestra perform, what you're seeing is the king and the peons. I mean, frankly, that's what an orchestra is. And it's wonderful for what it is. It comes from an aristocratic background, and the king tells everyone what to do, and they do it, and some are more talented, some are greater artists than others. And there's a place for that. I'm certainly not poo-pooing it. Who would care if I did? But I'm just saying, like that's what that is. Okay. And that's what we all put up as, the ultimate of a certain kind of art. Well, let them go see a jazz band play, and they will see how the baton is passed around from person to person, how everyone gets to have their hand on the steering wheel, so to speak, and how everyone has the right to do something.
Participatory democracy.
Let's see. I had a note that Jim Bright has raised his hand. Jim, are you on the phone?
I'm on here. Thank you, Sally. Loren, in 2001, I lived in Japan, and I was based in Hiroshima, but I went to Tokyo at least once a month. And when I went to visit my Japanese colleagues in Tokyo, we always went to jazz clubs, and they were the most passionate about jazz of anybody I ever knew on the planet. So I guess following up on Charlotte's question about the popularity of jazz overseas, is Japan seen as a hotbed? And are there other hotbeds for jazz in faraway places?
Oh yeah. In fact, I was in Japan around that time, and I'll tell you a kind of a funny anecdote, but it kind of means something. We played a concert. We're on a concert tour, and then they said we have to go to this club and hear this young Japanese woman who sings just like Billie Holiday. So we go to the club, and there she is, and I won't do my David Sedaris does Billie Holiday imitation, but he's something, I don't know why, but I'm feeling. She sounded almost like Billie Holiday. Unbelievable, the whole set. I went up to talk to her after the set. She didn't speak a word of English. I couldn't understand a thing I said. And the through line through that and jazz all over the world is it's a feeling. It transcends language. And there was something about Armstrong and Holiday and those players that people felt. Here's another anecdote that speaks to your question. And hotbeds now would be pretty much every continent in the world, Jim. Pretty much every continent, every country now, almost literally, has their version of a Louis Armstrong, their version of a Duke Ellington, their version of a Charlie Parker. It's just everywhere. In fact, there's been a movement in Europe with some critical writing for the last 20 or 30 years that says America is no longer the hotbed of jazz. It was at one time, it's not. But the other anecdote is this, and it speaks to your question. It seems apocryphal, but it's been told so many, it has its roots in real stories. And the story is that when Armstrong's records first started coming out in the mid-20s, and then in the late 1920s, when Armstrong became such a huge inspiration, there'd be no Bing Crosby without Armstrong, the way he sang and the whole thing, that young people loved his music. And a lot of the older generation felt about Armstrong's music because it was so black, and it had these funny words in it, and it had this kind of transgressive feel in it, and it referenced all kinds of taboo things, if you knew what to listen for in it, that a lot of the older generation didn't like it, in the same way that a lot of older folks now, or even people younger than older folks, don't understand hip hop or rap and just dismiss it without even trying to understand what it's about. People felt the same way about jazz. So here's the anecdote. The young person is playing the Armstrong record in Hungary or in Chile or in China, wherever the hell it was. And, and Louis singing, the parents walk by and they'll say, what is that noise? And it's, plus it's probably an African-American person. Turn that off. What is that crap? And then the grandparent walks by and, wants to be, listens with the kid and says, you know what? When they hear his voice, they say, you know what? He sounds like one of us. And that story really has roots in so many different places. And that speaks to the humanity. So when you mention about hotspots, it used to be France was the place that France and England were the two countries that really started writing about jazz long before we did in America, as great as any music that ever was in the world. And then gradually it spread, and then gradually in America, it kind of took hold. So that's your answer. But yeah, they love jazz in Japan. Oh my Lord. Although they're, because of
Loren,
the cultural thing. Yes, time to go? What?
No, well, I'm just, David Johnson had to go, but he wanted to let you know that he wore his Lester Young t-shirt today in your honor.
Okay, thank you. Now, I was just going to say that interesting cultural differences and the way that people act in public in Japan, and I've toured there many times. In Japan, what happens, as opposed to American audiences, for the most part, when they listen, they're engaged throughout the performance. They're shouting back and clapping along. Just because of cultural differences in Japan, for the most part, in my experience, people sit very quiet and reserved during the song, and then after the song, and then back to this. And you can, and you can generalize, culture by culture, about how different audiences react to the music. But in Tokyo one time, we were there, and I was quite young, but in the band I was with were some very well-known older players who had made a lot of great records in the past. And when we would come down into the lobby of the hotel in Tokyo, some of these guys would be waiting behind the pillars, behind the columns in the hotel lobby, and then run out with, these classic LPs and ask them to sign them. It was really, really wonderful. If only that would happen here in the States. Doesn't happen as often.
I have a question.
Sure.
You can't see me, but you can hear me, I hope.
Okay.
I have two young relatives who graduated from the jazz program at IU, and their real love is the very, very modern jazz, which I find really difficult. I don't hear anything in it. I don't find any rhythm to clap with. I don't find any tune. Is this because I'm old? So is this just another stage in this river that is moved on from hip hop to my not understanding what's happening in jazz now?
I mean, I have kind of a long view philosophical answer to that one, which is, I don't know
I'm old.
I don't know whether your parents or grandparents, loved the music that you listened to. I think Plato had it right. Plato Schwartz, of course, I'm talking about, but Plato, wrote, as we all know, the kids today, the hair's too long and they're rude at the table and they're late and they're slovenly and all that. And I'm not saying that you're saying that about your family, but what I mean is that just accept it. That's just the way that it is. Maybe you're not supposed to hear it. It speaks to them. So God bless them. And at least they're into something that is not, they're not sheep, like most people are with popular culture. They're sheep. Your kids, your grandkids or whatever are 1 out of a million if they're even listening to jazz music, which has such intellectual things in it as well as emotional things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I hear you. I don't like, frankly, we have this National Jazz Museum in Harlem, and for not anymore, but for years in the beginning of it, I was doing all the programming, and it was like not a one-man show, maybe a 3-person show. But I wound up booking and presenting a lot of music that frankly, I didn't quote unquote like, but that I respected. I knew it was great. I just didn't get it. But people that I knew and respected told me, they said, no, this is really wonderful. You just don't hear it. I say, great. So we presented it. And in the same sense, I guess that's what's happening with you. So don't worry about it.
Well, the other thing I would say is that I think that the young people now like jazz and they don't like classical, or they don't listen to it. They would much rather listen to jazz or any other realm.
Yeah. Well, that's easy to understand.
That's progress.
It has nothing to do with them. Yeah.
Right.
And it
That's
represents something, it represents something like jazz does to some people. It represents something exclusive. And that's not attractive to young people.
Yeah.
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 Mm.
Mm.
Well,
your
thank you
spinach.
again. Yeah, eat your spinach. Thank you, Loren, so much. Come back anytime. Come
Okay.
back next week to hear Lee Hamilton. And thank you, Loren. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's
No,
been,
really
this has been a
fantastic,
real,
Loren.
Really
real
great.
pleasure. Thank you.
Very,
Thank
very
you,
special
Loren.
to have you with us.
And
Thanks,
thank
Lee.
you, Lynn. Thank you,
Thank you.
Lynn, for the whole
Yeah.
idea.
Thank you,
you.
Lynn, for keeping your yearbook.
Thanks, Loren.
Bye.
Then
It was great to see you.
who's the flute player with Loren in that picture that you showed at the very beginning?
Pam Gruber,
Okay.
I think. I don't know
Nice.
anything about her.
Okay. Thank you all. Thanks very
He
much.
did tell
Okay.
me